everybody. Welcome to another episode of All the WrestleManias, the podcast. I'm your co-host, Tim Hackman.
And I'm your co-host, Rich Sigwald.
We're delighted to be back with you. We're always delighted to be back with you. We hope you enjoyed our most recent episode with the one and only David Crockett. What a phenomenal guy. What a great time we had talking to him. Rich, are you still feeling a little bit starstruck by your brush with greatness there?
I completely am. Even my wife, who is not a wrestling fan, last night was like, "You're talking to famous people on your podcast. What is that about?" So, it's kind of been a bit surreal and exciting to know that I got to talk to him, and I'm really disappointed that I won't be able to meet him in person on December 2nd.
Well, I've got another fun surprise for you. Not surprise, you knew what we're doing here, but we've got another major figure in the history of Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, the current commissioner of Virginia Championship Wrestling and a great friend of the show. I'd like to welcome today Mr. George Pantas. Welcome, George.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I am so happy to be on your podcast. I was happy to discover you guys, and when I did, I've been very faithful in listening and just absolutely love what you guys do. And God bless you both.
Oh, thanks so much, George. We really appreciate you being on here, and we're big fans of the VCW promotion and the product that you all put on. The next show, if you haven't marked your calendars already, and you really probably should, is Tidings of Destruction. It's December 2nd here at the Norfolk Masonic Temple. The tickets and all the usual are at VCWProWrestling.com. As we talked about on the last episode, David Crockett will be in attendance, and he's coming basically to help George celebrate his retirement from his role as VCW commissioner. That's pretty exciting, huh?
Exciting and melancholy and a little bit of everything else that I'm sure we'll get into. But yes, I can't wait to see David. It's been a few months since we've seen each other, and so from that regard, it's a happy reunion. But on a sad note there, because it's starting to hit me would be the best answer to the question. My wife is like, "George, you're saying everywhere you're going to retire. You're not really going to retire, are you?" I said, "Yes, I am," and so finally it's starting to hit because it's only a couple more days. We're in the final week.
It's coming up.
Yes.
Yeah, so congratulations on this upcoming retirement. It's great and amazing to spend 50 years in something that you clearly love. But what made you decide that now is the time to step back from your role as VCW commissioner after all these years?
Thank you, Rich. Thank you for the comment and the question. The real answer is, I wish at the end of the day we had this long out plan, and I would make my comeback and would have a different kind of a happy ending. And this is a happy ending of sorts. But I'll be 68 Valentine's Day. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. Dealing with some physical health issues, specifically my knees, my back. My foot, I have a severe tendon tear that the doctor said can literally go any moment. Last month we had the Greek festival, and even though I was, people say, "Well, you're just a master of ceremonies." Well, it's the festival, so I'm up there doing some dancing and exciting the crowd. So I was medicated, if you will, with cortisone shots in my knees, on my foot. So I'm praying that it'll hold through Saturday and longer, because I'm not really ready mentally to have the surgery. But it's just time. So I'm ready to retire from active competition, and not that I'm some major wrestling star. I mean, I've gotten in the ring in the past, but professional wrestling is about physical contact, and so somewhere I would need to have physical contact, whether it's with Jerry, and we'll get into my history with him, or anybody else for that matter. And so I just don't think it's fair for the product that I'm limited with what I could do, and the time has come to bow gracefully. I'll still help behind the scenes. I'll if they need me to take care of something behind the scenes, I will. But at the end of the night, when the clock rings midnight on December 2nd, I will no longer be the commissioner for VCW. And as far as my any uh, active involvement in wrestling, I am done.
Any idea on who's going to step into that role as the new commissioner after you hand in the
I do.
keys?
I do not, and it's something that I would like very much to have some input in, but we're not. We need to get over this, this Saturday first, and then I think I can look at it more objectively as well. Right now, there's too many emotions.
Let me nominate Tim.
Yeah, I'm happy to step in and serve. I do it for the love of the business and out of respect for George and for maybe the chance to smack Jerry with one of those kendo sticks. That's really all the payment that I would require, actually. So.
And that might be enough incentive for me to throw your name in the hat right there. Although I have to admit that in listening to the David Crockett interview, I was shocked. I tell you that you were not a Jim Crockett Promotions fan from the time you were born. I can't believe it.
I am deeply ashamed, and one of the real delights of this program actually has been getting to go back and watch some of that really classic stuff that I missed, the first time around. And
Yes.
so it's all you guys have seen it all a million times, I'm sure, but to me it's all new and it's very exciting. Actually, it's like discovering a whole different universe of wrestling that was not available to me as a kid. So it's been phenomenal, and I wouldn't qualify myself as big of a fan or aficionado as Rich is at this point, but I would definitely consider myself a fan by this point. I think I've watched enough to I don't know, at least get in the bottom, like get in on the ground floor,
Sure. Now, where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in South Central Pennsylvania, around
Okay.
York, PA, and it just
Yeah.
WWF was everywhere on TV back then, obviously.
Sure.
But that other stuff just wasn't. Occasionally, you'd flip by and you'd see like something that looked kind of like wrestling that you didn't quite recognize, and you just so. But
Very good. I'm just busting your chops, of course.
oh, it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. I'm used to it. So.
Yeah. So speaking of JCP and Mid Atlantic, we really enjoyed having Mr. Crockett on our show, and we thank you for making that happen for us. We really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
So since he's going to be at your retirement, that's a pretty big deal. How long have you known David, and how did you guys actually meet?
Sure. David and I go back at least 40 years ago. I have a beautiful story when it comes to my involvement with wrestling. And of course, like all of us, started as a fan and came to America when I was 10 years old. And that was back in 1966. Around 1968, I started to understand the English language a little bit. So I discovered wrestling here locally. It was Channel 10, NBC affiliate, that every Saturday at 5 p.m. It would come on. And I was drawn to it immediately. I think probably because wrestling, hey, the Greeks invented everything, right? So we invented wrestling too. So, so that drew me. And of course, I saw that it wasn't what I thought, what I grew up as a little child, but I understood, you didn't need to know the language to understand the good guys and the bad guys cheating. And I was hooked from day one. I literally would cry when they would preempt it because there was a golf, God forbid,
Oh, golf.
golf being played, and they wouldn't show it. And of course, they would always end in so many great cliffhangers that you were like, oh no, what happened next? And so that was my introduction. And then they started coming to the Hampton Coliseum. Opened up in 1971, and they started coming there. And I was able to go through getting rides from friends because no one drove in our house. But my father knew that I loved it, and he said, George, as long as you get good grades, you can go. When I went there, ran into a very dear friend from the church, much older. He was a grown man. I was a teenager. And his name, and he's really the one that I credit for opening the door for me for the wrestling. And I know, Rich, this is a very long answer, but
Mhm.
it gets us to first of all, as we know, I'm Greek, so I'm a storyteller.
Yeah.
We Greeks are famous for that, so I think we have to do part 2, 3, and 4 here. But so anyway, Tony Anthony, sports editor for the local paper there in Newport News. And what they would do back then is, and this is, and you guys touched on it with David Crockett about the erasing of the tapes. Well, you know, it was called the bicycle system, not a real bicycle, but they would drive up here. They would film it on Wednesday nights. They would come up here Thursday to do the show, swing by the station, leave the tape over in Portsmouth so they could air it on Saturday, and they would make just a couple of copies to take to the different TV stations, and then they would record over them because they were just so expensive. And so he would come here Thursday, Friday they go to Richmond, and on the way to Richmond, whether it was David Crockett or really and David mentioned the the Murnick family,
Hmm.
they're the ones that promoted this area. They were the right hand man, if you will, for Jim Crockett. So he would go by the paper, you know, buy ads for the paper, and Mr. Uh, Joe Murnick, became very good friends with Tony Anthony. Well, it was you know, God, thank you, God. That time that I was there, Tony was there, Mr. Murnick was there, and Tony made the introduction for me to meet, that I was a friend from the church, and asked Mr. Murnick to take good care of me. And then that was really it, because Mr. Murnick and his wife Shirley, and they were like in their late 60s, but they were my age really, and I was a teenager. They literally, you know, took me under their wing and allowed me to. And this is the most incredible part of the story. That 1970s, we're talking when kayfabe was kayfabe. I mean, it was super
Yeah.
secret. Yet, because I've always been a frustrated director, I started with my little regular 8 millimeter camera, silent, and then grew to Super 8 silent, and then color and sound. They allowed me to sit by the ring apron next to the ring announcer and film the young Ric Flairs, the young Ricky Steamboats, and on and on and on. And thank you God, I filmed it, and I, you know, eventually left it in the closet. And then about 10 years ago, when I decided to look at it, it was crisp and clear. And thanks
Mm.
to that, gets to another part of the story with, you know, what I did with it with documentaries and DVDs. So, in saying all that, that's how I got my foot in the door through the Murnick family. And then as I got a little bit older, and I was an older, you know, teenager, and then in my early 20s, that's really, it was in the early 80s that Mr. Murnick introduced me to David through their sons. Because he was older, he had two sons, Elliot and Carl. Carl hated my guts. He would see me by the ringside, and if the father wasn't there, he'd kick me out of there. He was trying to protect the business, I guess. Elliot allowed me to sit there because Elliot was married to a Greek girl. And so, being Greek, I guess he felt bad. I don't know. And David and Elliot and Carl were very tight. So Elliot introduced me to David, and then, you know, David would ask me to do favors. Maybe I'd walk the ring jacket sometime, take some of the guys to their hotel and with my car. As a matter of fact, there's a great Road Warrior story about taking them to their hotel in Virginia Beach that we can get into if you want to later.
Oh yeah.
So that's the long answer to how I met David. And then the older, you know, he's well, I'm 68, he's 76, but you know, as we all become adults, that friendship just really matured. And when he found out that when he started working for WCW, and they wanted having all the footage, because I didn't just film with my camera. You guys don't know this. Here's a little exclusive. What I also have is I bought back in 1982, I bought a VCR for like $1,000 for two reasons and two reasons only. To tape Johnny Carson because I was teaching then and it was too late to stay up and watch him, and to tape my wrestling. So I did not erase over them. I have many
Mm,
VHS tapes of the Mid Atlantic shows from back then. So I have stuff that they probably erased. I have it. And so anyway, when David found out that I had that, I think one of you asked him what was like his favorite match. Rich, I think you did. What was the
yeah.
favorite match that he called? And his answer has never changed: the Rock and Roll Express versus the Russians. And so when he found out I had that match, I actually made the copy for him, and that really blossomed our friendship.
That's incredible.
Yes, yes,
What a odyssey you've been on. Not to.
very much so, very much so.
So I know that fans who come to the show on December 2nd will have the opportunity to have their pictures taken with both you and David during intermission. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then
And the picture that they will take with David is we decided we want to recreate, and also David is going to bring the original WCW World Tag Team belts with him, original, not a maker making duplicates, and so the fans can hold him in the picture, and David will hold a VCW microphone like he's interviewing them. So it's really quite, I think, quite a visual. That was one of the reasons I was hoping Rich would be down there, because I know that's a photo op he would not have missed for all the Teen China.
Yeah. Yeah. I would have just been throwing all my cash out on the ring right there. Just this, and then if I don't know, then I'd want to go back and like find that set of the old World Championship Wrestling set that you guys recreated for Ric Flair's last match stuff, and just live in it. I want Tony Schiavone to yell at me. It's the whole
Yes,
it's the whole
sir.
shebang. That
Yes,
I.
sir.
But yeah, I am quite disappointed that I won't be able to make it down.
Of course, my voices in my youth were Bob Caudle. And since you've seen Tim the old tapes, you know who Bob Caudle is. I know Rich, you do. And it was Bob and David, and then eventually they brought in Tony. And something else that you guys may or may not be aware is once Jim Crockett Promotions was sold to Jim Crockett to Ted Turner. Some of the wrestlers, Ricky Steamboat, one of them, Nasty Boys, a couple of others, they got together with Paul Jones with some investors, and they actually opened up something called South Atlantic Professional Wrestling.
Hmm.
And they convinced Bob Caudle to first it was North American, and then they changed it to South Atlantic, and to be the voice. And I wound up being, this was like in 89, 90, and I wound up being the Virginia promoter for them. And when one of the times I went down there, and I'm sitting next to Bob Caudle, and he's introducing me as the Virginia South Atlantic Wrestling promoter. And I'm like, I don't want to wake up if this is a dream. Bob Caudle is introducing me as the Virginia promoter. This is unreal. So I can totally relate, Rich, with what you said about Tony Schiavone yelling at you.
Yeah.
that's really funny. Yeah, I can't imagine being in that position and just all of a sudden there among these guys that you watched on TV and been so hooked by. So
as
I
much
thought,
as as much as I love and adore David as a friend, it's still, there are days that I'm like, David just texted me. David Crockett just texted. It's still surreal on some levels, because, like you guys, we're at the end of the day, we're real fans. And when you're real, to me, with wrestling, you either love it or hate it. There's no in between. And when you're a real fan, you're gonna mark out, for lack of, to me, mark is not a bad word. It's, we're
Absolutely not.
fans. Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, I
I
cut you off, Tim.
no, like I found, so what caused me actually to drift away from wrestling for a while was that I got too into it and I started reading all the spoiler sheets and the dirt sheets and stuff like that on the internet, and it took the magic out of it for me. And
Yes.
so actually, my road back into watching wrestling regularly was uh, right after my mom had passed. Um,
I'm sorry.
a friend whose father had recently passed asked me to go to a Ring of Honor show with him,
Oh, wow.
and that brought me right back in because I I really didn't know anything about Ring of Honor. I didn't know what was happening there. I'd heard of it, but that was it. And so there was no way for me to get spoiled. There was no way for me to know what was going to happen or to know the people. And I just knew the good guys, the bad guys. And I felt this reconnection back with my mom through it,
That's beautiful.
because my mom, as I've said probably almost every episode of this podcast now, that my mom is really the one that got me into watching pro wrestling. And so having that connection again, and now it's just been a runaway train. My wife had no idea that I was really into pro wrestling that much until I went to that show, and then it was just like, oh, by the way, we're going to get Peacock without any commercials because I need to watch everything that's on it. And I'm going to start a podcast with my friend Tim, and I'm going to it
Only.
was just right down the rabbit hole with pro
Yes.
wrestling. And so I am definitely a mark. But again, I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, not at all. Who are some? You probably mentioned it already, but who are some of your moms? Just give me like 3 or 4 of her favorite wrestlers.
So my mom was really head over heels for Gorgeous George. So like every time we watch wrestling, she would talk about Gorgeous George. She loved Ric Flair, in a love to hate kind of way.
Yes, yes.
Um, yeah. So she also really liked the Road Warriors as well, because
I was wondering why
she,
you popped when I said I have a
yeah,
great Road Warrior
she
story.
she liked the rough guys. She liked it. She just wanted
Yes,
to see the fights. She had definite bloodlust when it came to wrestling, and that definitely satisfied that for her. So I think those are probably the top ones. And I remember her enjoying the Rock and Roll Express a lot too.
I would walk around at the school singing that song.
Yeah, Rich is super into the theme songs from the different wrestlers, the entrance musics and stuff. So all the music that you hear on the show, Rich composes himself, and
Oh,
he's
wow, that's awesome!
very
Bravo, Rich! Congratulations.
Thank you.
he's influenced by a lot of that old school. Those ones that Jimmy Hart and his partner wrote, and um,
Yes,
some very talented dudes. So I thought we just kind of mentioned the VCW show on December 2nd. I thought we could
yes,
chat a little
please.
bit about the card there, and then we'll come back to the
Beautiful.
Your Amazing Story. It's a stacked card. The shows are always a lot of fun. They're always just sort of action from start to finish. There's some story, there's some comedy, there's some hijinks, but they're really kind of a family friendly event. And the VCW has a lot of just really cool stars. So right now the card's looking like former, and we can talk about that for a sec. VCW heavyweight champion The Boar is gonna go up against Ring of Honor star Moses. Moses is a big old dude. He's coming in for the first time, I think, right? He hasn't been with you guys before.
The very first time I was one of the, I had seen him and talked to some of the others and thought, wow, what a test that he would be for Bohr if we can bring him in and challenge him for the title. Of course, now Tim, you were there and you saw Bohr lose the title. Yes, very disappointing. And Bohr has just such an incredible story for the fans listening uh, who have not heard me say this on maybe on another podcast. What an amazing behind the scenes story with Bohr. He grew up right here in the Hampton Roads area, over in Hampton. And this is a true story with what I'm going to say next. As a little boy, he would come to, when VCW would do the shows over at the Bingo Mercury Center Hall over there, he would come and he would tug on on my jacket and say, Mr. Pantas, Mr. Pantas, I'm going to be a wrestler. And he was a skinny little thing, of course, back then and very young. I'm like, sure, yeah, sure, son, sure. Yeah. And now look at him. Oh my God. And to become our heavyweight champion on top of that, just and thank you for having him on, by the way.
Yeah, he was
But
great. We had a lot of fun talking to him. That's
Anytime.
that screenshot of the three of us talking and him sitting there in his boar mask is one of my favorite pictures.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that he really got a little bit of a screw job there in Alexandria
yes.
from good old Joe Keys.
So both of these guys have something to prove. Obviously, Moses, first time, he wants to impress the crowd. And I'm going to pause for a second to say, I'm a firm believer when WWE or AEW they do their house shows, because that's where you get to see, like real, not real. What you get to see is long matches rather than on TV. Everything is timed, and 2 minutes and it's over already. And so back when I was watching it as a fan, I loved it when a new wrestler came in, because it was very obvious that wrestler had something to prove to the fans, had something to prove to the other wrestlers that I can hang with you guys, and it was just true competitive, matches. And so my gut feeling says Moses has something to prove. Meanwhile, Bohr wants the title shot again, so he's got something to prove, that he's still in contention. And so this is going to be one of those matches, going to be hard fought, and I can't wait to be right there at ringside to see it.
Yeah, it should be a good one. Just two big old dudes running into each other. It's going to be great. Also on the card, the new VCW Heavyweight Champion, Boo Joe Keys, again, who stole one a few weeks back, is going to go up against the former VCW Heavyweight Champion, another great friend of the show, Brandon Scott. Is going to get a title shot. I'm excited to see that one. I don't. I have feelings about Joe Keys, but I'm a Brandon Scott fan, and I'll be rooting for him. I don't know. He's a little on the small side compared to Joe, though. What do you think?
Well, of course, and now he goes by Joseph Keys, by the way,
Very
no longer
fancy.
Joe. Yes.
Not on the show. He's still Joe Keys.
There
Sorry.
you go.
If he's lucky, we'll call him Joe.
Yeah.
Yes. And of course, Brandon has that incredible experience. So many years in the 16, 17, I think, years in the business. Has competed on the biggest companies, both in AEW and many times over in WWE in various capacities. And so he's got that skill. He was our longest reigning VCW heavyweight champion. And so I know that Brandon is going to go into this match. Well, what I don't know is, because he's wrestled heel or as a bad guy for such a long time, and with Joseph Keys being the bad guy, I'm curious to see if is this going to be the battle of the bullies, if you will, or is this going to be Brandon taking the high road? I'm interested to see how Brandon has decided to wrestle this match. So I'm looking forward to this one as well because of that reason alone. I've loved Brandon through the years, but I wasn't crazy with his last run when he started, especially when he aligned himself with Jerry Stephanichis there.
The worst. Yeah. No, it was fun to see him as a face at the Alexandria show. We were both happy to cheer for him.
Yeah.
Actually, his wife came over and said, "You better cheer for Brandon this time." And I actually, I was happy to oblige. I don't want to get in trouble with the wife.
That's
So,
right.
Yeah, Joe Keys has like kind of a Rick Rude kind of look to him. I thought, like, with the stature and the trunk style, and even some of his ring work, I thought was really Rick Rude esque.
I think that's a very fair comparison, and he also has wrestled in Ring of Honor. He's been he has that experience as well. This really is, and that's the other beautiful thing when it comes to independent wrestling, that you at least on our level. And thank you, Tim, for saying earlier that we are family entertainment, because we pride ourselves in that, but we also pride ourselves in finding wrestlers that have been around and can definitely put on a quality product and a quality match. And that's something that we're very proud of and will continue to bring in wrestlers that can do that.
Yeah, 100%. Keep going on the card here. Rex Lawless, another just big old dude with Neil Sharkey. He's aligned himself with the Sharkey tank, unfortunately, versus local hero, I would call him, Phil Brown. Phil Brown is a guy that's been around here for a long time, and the fans absolutely love him. Rex Lawless, on the other hand, is a relative newcomer. I think the first time we saw him was at that ODU show, maybe. And that dude is massive. Like, Vince McMahon always had the airport test, right? Like, you see a guy in the airport and you're like, oh, that guy is somebody, right?
Yeah.
And he has that thing, whatever that is. He's big and he's wide and he's anyway. So that, again,
He
it should
definitely has
be
the look of a professional wrestler. Yes.
100%. Yeah. And Phil, like I said, Phil Brown is also just an absolute unit. So that should be a good one as well.
Phil is our, I've called him for several years now, our Undertaker, in the sense that he has been with us for quite a long time, has that loyal following from Hampton. Actually went to Hampton High School, so has that loyal following, and he's just as jacked as Mr. Lawless there. So this is another one of those matches that I think is going to surprise the fans with the physicality of it.
Yeah, maybe a bit of a youth versus experience vibe there too.
Yes, indeed.
Greek God Papadon is going up against Chris Slade. Chris is a relative newcomer. He's been really, really impressive in the last few times we've seen him. Smaller guy, super fast, high flyer, really acrobatic and impressive. And of course, Papadon is just again an absolute specimen, a guy who's really good at being the bad guy and taunting the fans. He thinks he's so much better than everybody else. I don't know if that's because he's Greek and you guys are just better at things, or I don't know what his whole deal is there, but that should be a good one too.
Yes, and of course you have a veteran versus, like you said, a young high flyer, and Papadon is more of a groundsman. This is going to be an interesting match for me to see. Papadon and I have went round and round with each other. I originally brought him in because of the Greek connection, let's be honest. But then he quickly showed his true colors, and he and I went sideways on several times. But at the end of the day, you cannot deny talent, and he is a super talented veteran. He was actually in the movie The Wrestler. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I did, yeah.
And he would be another great one to have on your show. And we can, of course, make that happen. So yes, and with this match is going to be a match that I think is going to surprise a lot of fans. I'm curious to see if Papadon decides to go up high with this.
Yeah, he's a tough guy for sure. We'll see if he can adjust to somebody a little quicker and younger. The U.S. Liberty Lottery champion, the Hoss of all Hosses, Devantes, is going up against Saul Esparza. Again, Saul is somebody who's made a turn recently. He was kind of aligned with Neil Sharkey and kind of a little sleazy a little bit, but at the last show he kind of, I don't know, he showed a different side of himself. What do you think?
Yes, yes, indeed. And at the end of the day, you have to be hungry, and hungry means you have to chase the belts, because if you don't chase, why then are you in the business? And so Saul really, I think, has made a conscious decision to start making a bigger name for himself. And what better way than to take on the Hoss of all horses? I mean, if he can defeat him, he did pretty well in that battle royal. He came the winner. So I don't know, but I think it's gonna. I think what's also interesting is which side is Neil going to take, because these are both his men still. Saul didn't officially leave Sharkey, so this is definitely one that has me curious to see what's going to happen.
Well, Neil's a squirmy guy. He's just gonna go on the side of whoever wins. He's just gonna hang back, and he's gonna back whoever's in control to that match whenever. And so he's gonna change sides a bunch, and then he's gonna be super happy about whoever wins. That's what's gonna happen.
You remember what I said? If I start laughing, I'm going to start coughing. So, but you're definitely sorry, if fans listening, fighting a little bit cold here. But yes, I think you described Neil to the T.
I do enjoy booing him at the matches and insulting
He-
his clothes. It's kind of one of my favorite pastimes. So, and then the last one that I have here on the card is the Tidings of Destruction Derby. There's 8 entrants. The first pin or the submission wins that one. That should be a lot of fun. I don't see a women's match on here at the moment. Are you guys looking for a matchup, or what do you think?
Well, we still have a couple of days, so we have to
Okay.
wait and see what happens. But yes, that Derby one, we came up with that concept a couple of years ago. It's literally like we called it Derby, for a reason. There, like the cars when they're all in the center there of the Coliseum, and they're driving all over the place and hitting each other all over the place. Same concept. We're going to put the wrestlers in the ring all at the same time, and then just let them go, and whoever pins gets a pin, then they're the winner. And of course, if you're the winner, then you have bragging rights and you can start going after titles. So this is going to be a very fun match.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. The chaos of that kind of thing is always a good time. Let's see what else. So yeah. So
And we
anyway,
do want to say,
that's
while we're in
yeah.
that clip, we do want to just mention one more time that fans they can still obviously buy tickets at the door, as you mentioned earlier. Uh, Front row has been sold out for quite some time. There's a few seats remaining at ringside, and we definitely have general admission. And they can go to vcwprowrestling.com for their tickets, and buy them and be ready and just walk right in.
Awesome. Yeah, very affordable show. Check it out. You'll have a good time for sure. All right. So thanks for running down the card with us. We're excited to check it out. I think Rich was going to pick up with some questions a little bit about your story of coming to the U.S. as a young man. You alluded to it a little bit.
Yeah. So basically, it's just like your immigration story. So my father immigrated to the U.S. in 1959 from Germany. So I'm always interested in people's immigration story and what brought them to the United States, what brought their family to the United States. So what about yours?
So before I answer, I have to ask you a question. Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Kind of.
Well, that's all I know. So we're in the same boat. So,
I went to Germany a couple years ago with my family, and I
oh,
was the only
nice.
one able to read the menus and the street signs. But after that, that was
Where in Germany is your dad from? Were you able to go back home?
yeah, we went to Munich for a week, and so that's
Beautiful,
where he was from, and it
beautiful.
was quite a trip.
Yes. So our story basically is, I'm from a small village of at that point less than 500 people, very poor in the sense that we had no electricity, no running water in the house. We were poor, but we didn't know that we were poor, I guess. I didn't know that I was poor until I came to America. I was like, oh my God. We weren't poor. We were poor. We couldn't even afford the letter R. uh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And my father, so it was the 1960s, and everybody was leaving Greece to go. Usually they would go to Germany. Funny, I used to say Germany because I have often said, if my father had not come to America, the other two options were going to be either Australia, because Australia at that time, I don't know what their laws are today, is they needed people, and so you could go straight over there. You didn't have to have, like here in America, somebody sponsor you and things like that. Or many of the Greeks would go to Germany and work in the factories. So I have often said, if I never came to America, more than likely I would have been in Germany, working in one of the factories. So so my father had a skill, and that's the best part of the story. He was a tinsmith, and that became crucial later on. So we had a relative here, and every Christmas he would send. He was born and I'm from the village of Dafia, on the island of Lesvos, And Tim, since you are a librarian and a connoisseur of books, you will appreciate this little quick connection of the island that I am from, in the sense that in the story of the Trojan War, it was my island that when they left the Trojan horse behind, the Greeks, to trick the Trojans into bringing the horse in, and hence the soldiers, they had to, the rest of them, Ulysses and the rest of them, or Odysseus is how we say the name in Greek, they had to hide somewhere. They hid on my island and waited for the fire signal. I'm from the island of Lesbos, very, very near Turkey. If when you land in the capital, you can literally see Turkey on the other side. And so,
The famous Greek poet Sappho is also from Lesbos. It's
yes, indeed,
one of the greatest. Yeah.
very, very. And so, this relative, Uncle George, out of respect, I called him, but he was really a distant relative, second or third cousin. Did extremely well here over in the Newport News area in real estate. And he would always send us to the children toys and to my parents money, and always a letter to my father. If you want to come to America, I'll bring you. And if you like it, we'll figure out a way for you to stay here. So finally, it was 1964. My father was close to, like I said, going to Australia, because many of the young men from our village were going there. So there was a connection. And then he said, "Well, everybody talks America, America. Let me try it and see what happens." And so he came over as a tourist, of course, meaning he would have to go back. And once here, he decided that he could make a go of it. And how long have you guys, Tim? How long have you lived in this area?
I've been here about a year and a
Oh,
half.
okay. So there was a very famous factory in Hampton called the Brass Shop, Brass, metals. And it was there, and the owner of that factory and Uncle George were good friends. So he took my father over to that factory, and my father, because he was a tinsmith and knew how to work with metals, was able to do extremely well there. And at that time, there was a law, and it's probably still true today, that if you're an immigrant, if you have a skill and you're needed within a certain geographical area and you're the best at it, and somebody's willing to sponsor you and fill out the paperwork, you can stay here. And that's how my father was able to stay here. That was 1964. He was a very proud man, and was not going to accept any more help from Uncle George as far as money. So he literally worked from 8 in the morning until 10 at night, Monday through Saturday. A very hard physical job. When we came over and I would see him come home, he was always dirty and filthy, because he would stand in front of a buffing machine, and he would, all that dirt of the brass items would, be on his clothes and stuff. But in 2 years, he was able to save enough money to send us money every month, my mother, sister, and I, so we could live. He was our only source of income. Put money down on a little house and pay for our tickets. And we came over on a ship because we brought our belongings with us. And so he came in 64 and we came in 1966. And that's how I came to America. And we heard earlier what happened. Actually, what happened in 1968, yes, I discovered wrestling, but I also discovered the world of work. In 1968, we called it junior high school back then. I come home and I see my father home early from work and crying. Now, my father was a man's man. You didn't show those kind of emotions. It scared me a lot. And I asked what happened, and what had happened was this factory that we're talking about burned down to the ground. And my father didn't speak the English language, didn't understand what was happening. In his mind, I can't work anywhere else. I don't speak American. I'm going to have to go back a failure. But thank God for insurance. And the owner, it was just an old building and bad wiring. They built a new place. But while they were building the new place where I wound up working, I went to the old place to help sort out the burnt pieces. And there, the boss was so impressed with the other children. I was 12 years old. And where the other kids were playing, I was separating the good from the bad. And he offered me a job making 50 cents an hour, which was good money for me. And so I started working since the age of 12. I did not stop until I retired in 2019, 50 years later. I put in 40 years in education, and now getting ready to do 50 plus years retirement with our crazy, wild, and beautiful world of professional wrestling. So that's my story of how we came to America.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's quite a journey, and unique, but probably also fairly common in terms of kind of a typical immigrant story, and coming and starting starting from the bottom, and kind of working your way.
Yes, I would say the only thing that's not typical about me is one of the few Greeks that I did not go into the wrestling. I mean, into the restaurant business, because
Mm.
most Greeks,
Yeah,
of course, own restaurants. And but on a serious note, I would see that world every Sunday. I would see Greeks leaving church earlier than the service was over, and I would ask my mother why they're leaving, and she was like, "Because they have a restaurant. They got to go get ready for the noon crowd." And I decided that wasn't the world that I wanted to be involved with. Plus, from day one, when I was a little boy, I've always wanted to go into education. Teachers were very well respected in my little village, not only from a money perspective. They made much more money than the farmers that lived in my little village, but respect. That's a teacher. I mean, when a teacher would walk into the classroom, the students stood up out of respect. Okay, when a teacher walked into, I don't know, a cafe and there wasn't a seat, somebody would stand up so they can sit down. So you see that as a little child, it's like, oh my God, that's the job I want. And then I came to America and I found out teachers have no respect, get no respect, and they get paid very little money. But that love just always drew me to it, and I was very blessed to go into that field and feel very accomplished in the many lives that I was able to help. Thank God.
And so, when did you gain citizenship?
Um, so um, so that's an interesting story. I don't think I've never talked about this on a public platform. I have been and always will be very proud of my Greek heritage. As a matter of fact, when I still do public speaking, but when I was more active with it, I would introduce myself as saying, "I am Greek born and American bred, a thoroughbred." and but I fought becoming an American citizen because I would have to give up my Greek citizenship. I thought I did not do my homework. And number two, God forbid, if America ever went to war with Greece, I would have to pick up a gun and fight a Greek. And I just couldn't do it. And so I fought it when I was growing up. But then, reality kicks in. And when I became a teacher, I quickly found out when I was looking for a job what my father had to go through every year. The boss had to fill out the paperwork, and it just made it more difficult for somebody who might want to give me a job. And so once I became an educator, that's when we decided as a family all to become American citizens. And so that was very early on. And Greece actually believes in dual citizenship. So I'm still a Greek citizen. America, of course, does not. From American perspective, I'm only an American citizen. And I finally just accepted in my heart, well, number one, the Greeks and the Americans get along, so they'll never fight against each other. And number two, if it comes down to it, I will fight for America, but in an office. I will not pick up a gun and shoot another Greek, but I'll fight against them, but from a mental perspective, if you will. I'm a very, 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 very proud American, and so blessed to be in this great country. And I am very grateful for what America has offered us, and as most immigrants are. I'm sure, Rich, your father felt the same way, and that was something that I did my best to implant in my students, the importance of respecting what America has to offer us. I've always said to them, as long as you're not afraid to work, you can, here in this country, not only will you either find a job, but if you can't find a job, you can make your own job. You don't have that opportunity in many other countries. So God bless
Yeah.
America.
All right. I feel like we should queue up America the Beautiful or something. I
Or
don't know.
Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Whoa!
Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Ho!
Yeah, I had the same thought. So,
Hey there, tough guy.
um,
Hey.
hey there, tough guy. So it feels a little silly, actually, honestly, to go back to wrestling after such a great story. But I mean, that is what we're here to talk about. So maybe we should. What do you think?
Yes, most
I
definitely.
think Rich.
I have some great stories I'd love to share with you guys. Far away.
Maybe yeah. So maybe that's where we can kind of pick up. So just by virtue of being around, you came to know and meet, dozens, hundreds of major wrestling figures. I've seen pictures of you with Roddy Piper, the Ultimate Warrior, the Generation X, the Undertaker, Tommy Dreamer, Paul Heyman, Kurt Angle, the Iron Sheik, J.J. Dillon, of course, and more. I think Rich and I were both when we became Facebook friends with you. All of a sudden, Facebook was suggesting that we become
Yeah.
friends with like some of these people that we know and love, and it wasn't their like fan accounts, it was their actual personal accounts. So that was kind of an interesting
Oh,
little
that's cool.
glimpse behind the curtain.
Yeah.
um, so I know you alluded to a Road Warrior story, and maybe you have a few other memories of of meeting some of those folks, and maybe there were a couple that were particularly memorable that you'd want to regale us
Sure.
with.
So let's do the Road Warrior story because it's a fun one. So they're at the Norfolk Scope. They finish wrestling, and David calls me over, David Crockett, and says, George, would you mind taking the guys over there over in Virginia Beach? Can you take them over after the show? I said, well, David, number one, I don't mind, but number two, I need to tell you what kind of car I have. At that time, I had a little Chevette, very small car to put these monsters in. Okay, we all know how jacked both Road Warriors were. And so I went over and I spoke with Animal and Hawk and Paul. I said, guys, I have no problem taking you, but just know it's a little, little Chevette. Oh, that's fine, George. That's fine. So I was, of course, excited to take them because I was a huge fan of theirs. And so, but then I started thinking, oh, wait a minute, they're bad guys, and I wasn't parked underneath the scope. I was parked out, outside. So the fans are going to see them getting into the car. Now I started worrying. Oh my God, they're going to start throwing things at my car. So when we got out, I'm like, guys, we got a book. My car's way over there. Let's go. And so we got in the car. As a matter of fact, some of the fans saw us and they started like coming in our direction. But I hit that accelerator when we got out of that parking lot. But the funny part of the story that I want to share is, so it's summertime. I have Animal sitting in the front, Paul and Hawk in the back, and I hear Paul tell Animal, "Hey, and he called him Animal, his real name Joe. Hey, Animal, close the window. George has the air conditioner on." And I hear Animal say, "I can't." And I'm thinking to myself, "What do you mean you can't?" Now I didn't have those electronic buttons. It was that old hand crank. All you got to do is just turn the. I didn't want to. I wasn't going to say it to him, but I said all you got to do is just turn the little hand thing. And then Paul says, "Well, what do you mean you can't?" He says, "I can't get my hand down there to turn the handle. So many muscles on top of muscles. The chest out to here, the arms out to here. What you and I do regular, put our arms down. He couldn't do that to roll the window." And it was like, oh my God. So, and then of course I got him to the hotel and we hung out and had some fun times together. But that's my fun story, that he could not close the window because he was so huge.
That's pretty funny. Those guys were massive. I always kind of wondered actually if people called them Hawk and Animal, if they called them Joe and what Mike was it Mike?
Mike, yes, yes, and then that varied a lot, in being behind there. It just depended on the wrestler and how they were originally met. What I've noticed with them is how they originally meet you is what they go by. There are wrestlers to this day that call them Mick Foley, either they call him Mankind or they call him Cactus Jack because that's how they met him.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
It,
sense.
it does. It does. I do want to, for the fans listening, I do want to share this going back a little bit. When I started, I realized quickly as a fan. This was specifically more at the Hampton Coliseum. That I liked the bad guys, and I liked them for a couple of reasons because they were the bad guys, but also it was easier to get to them. The good guys, they were always surrounded by all these girls, and it was very hard as a guy to get in there to shake hand and say hello. But the bad guys, nobody wanted to go around them. So, so the very first one I ever went to, either one of, well, I'm sure Rich is familiar with the original Minnesota Wrecking Crew, Ollie and Gene Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so so I was a huge fan of theirs. So I go, I see Gene, and back then they didn't have the security that we have today. It was just a little rope. You just step over and you go. So I was so excited. I saw him. Oh my God, I want to go say hi to him. So I stepped over the rope, went over there. Hi, Mr. Anderson. I'm a huge fan of yours. He checks me up and down. I was a skinny little thing. He says, "Get the blankety blank out of my blankety blank face." Oh my God, yes, sir. I backed up, but I quickly figured it out. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know that Mr. Murnick was a friend of mine and all that. So, excuse me. So what I figured out quickly was, if I want to meet a Gene Anderson, I need to see him. He needs to see me talking to a Ric Flair or a Greg Valentine or any of the others, because then he'll know, oh, well, if Rick is talking to him, then hey, I can talk. I can talk to him too. So that was my little slow process of getting to know the wrestlers, and then once they realized who I was, and my personality is very open, we slowly became friends. It's important to do those things step at a time. Wrestling is about trust. If they don't trust you, they're not going to let you into that inner circle. Now, I have a story that I haven't told about Ric Flair in forever, and
Uh-oh.
and Rich, this may touch a little bit on what you said earlier about your mom. So my father was very sick, and it was just a sad time at our house. And I would go to visit, and he had cancer, and it had gotten so bad he couldn't get out of bed anymore, and it was just sad. And so I'm thinking, what can I do? What can I do to cheer my mother and my father? And I realized I had went to visit on a Thursday night. Oh my God, it's Thursday night. They're at the Scope. So back then we didn't have cell phones, but we did have pay phones in the back, and I knew that payphone number because I would go to the back. And so I decided I'm going to call and pray that somebody would answer that would know me. And well, I was going to ask to talk to Rick, because by then Rick Flair. Rick and I had become friends. And I would ask him to see if you could get on the phone for a minute just to kind of cheer up my father. And so I called, and thank God, Wahoo McDaniel answers the phone. Wahoo, of course, knew who I was. And what I did not know, and this is important to the story, but I'm going to say now I'm kind of jumping back and forth because I didn't find out until after we buried my father. And we buried my father in Greece. And when I came back to thank everybody, I found this out. At the same time that my father was ill, Wahoo's father was ill. So when I explained the situation, he immediately understood. He didn't say, "Oh yeah, George, I understand." The only thing he said is, "Hold on, don't hang up." And he went and he grabbed Rick, because Wahoo was kind of running the back for the Crockett's, and I found out later also that Rick um, was warming up for his match. So it wasn't like 3 hours later he was going to wrestle. But God bless him. He got on the phone. We had two phones, one in the bedroom, one in the living room. I was on the living room to translate. And Ric Flair has always been, regardless what you hear people say, he will always address you, "Hello, sir. How are you?" Very polite, very well mannered. And even though he was a bad guy, when away from the limelight, which was never for him, he was always very, very polite. So, "Hello, Mr. Pantas. George tells me you're not feeling well. I'm sorry." And I would translate, and then my father, I'll never forget this. He was, "Oh, I watch you on TV. I go to watch you now." He couldn't move. He couldn't do anything. But it put a smile on my father's face. It
Hmm.
put a smile on my mother's face. And that's why I don't care what Ric Flair does. Ric Flair will always be number one with me, and why I helped the way I did with his last match and all these other things. He will always be number one for me. The Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Woo! Because the real Ric Flair is that kind of a man, very loving, very caring.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
That's a great story. So, I don't know if he would like that kind of warm fuzzy getting out there. Well, he's kind of moved on
Well,
beyond his.
and now he probably would, but it's funny you should say that, because when he retired after his match with Shawn Michaels, we at VCW were one of the first to bring him in for autograph signings. This was like back in 208, 209, which was another cool moment for me. As he's being introduced, I got to do gorilla position for Ric Flair. So they he's called to the ring. I tap him on the shoulder and say, "Okay, Rick, go ahead in." And when he walked through the curtain, I'm like, "I just did gorilla position for Ric Flair. I can die now and go to wrestling heaven. What can be better than doing gorilla position for Ric Flair?" Of course, I've been blessed to do other cool things after that, but that was a very cool moment. But I share that story to say I had him on radio to promote the show, and I called in and I told the story. And Rick says, "George, you're killing my gimmick here. You're not supposed to tell that story on radio."
Yeah, we're getting quite the full picture of the man Ric Flair here, with either him partying at the Marriott in Baltimore with only his robe and championship belt, to him calling your sick father and cheering him up and addressing him as sir.
Well, I got news for you. I was at that party in Baltimore.
Of course you were. He didn't poke you in the back of the head, did he?
No. Oh, yes, I'm very blessed to be at the original Jim Crockett Cup in New Orleans. And then the second year they had it in Baltimore, and I was able to go to that as well. And just a lot of fun stories there, which we could go into if you.
We should probably have you on the show to watch one of those shows that you were in attendance for. One of the wasn't one of the Starcades here in Norfolk, I think, right?
Yes,
Rich?
Yeah.
88, I think, the True Grit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That'd be a fun one to watch and talk to you about your memories of that one.
The first time I met you was at the Old Dominion University show, and within 30 seconds, you were telling me an incredible story about you, Undertaker, Paul Bearer, and and your near casting of being Undertaker.
And to this day, I think about that, and it's one of those if moments. But I'm also a believer that everything happens for a reason. So it is a great story, and started to tell it about a year and a half ago, only because you tell a story like that, and who's going to believe it, right? Oh yeah, sure. If it happened, we would have seen you on TV. So it was one of those that I just kind of kept to myself. But once I started doing the podcast, I decided to share it, and the happy ending is the best part of the story. So here we go. So it's the early '90s. They introduced the character of Kane and then WWF. And at that time, I'm the typical Greek looking appearance, the dark hair, the mustache, had put on a little extra weight there. So fans would, honest to goodness, stop me at the mall or at the grocery store, and they would say, "You're Paul Bearer." And I would honestly tell them, "No, I'm George Pantas." And it got so bad to the point that I wound up lying a couple of times just to get him off my back. "Okay, yeah, sure, I'm Paul Bearer," because they thought I was like staying in character as the bad guy, and would take a picture and I'd sign Paul Bearer. But it happened enough time. True story. I'm not making any of this up. It happened enough times for me to say, well, maybe we can do something with this, because at that time, the person who was in charge of all the talent relations in the WWF was J.J. Dillon, and J.J. was a very, very dear friend of mine, still is to this day. And so I had I had his home phone number. I called him. I explained to him what happened. what was happening, and that I had an idea. And the idea was that I'm the real Paul Bearer, that the other guy is my evil brother. And if you guys remember the storyline with Cain, Cain was
Yeah.
in an insane asylum. So Cain found me in an insane asylum where the other Paul Bearer had locked me up. Cain gets me out. I manage Cain against the other Paul Bearer and Undertaker. We take that around the loop, and then come WrestleMania, I turn on I turn on Cain. That's as far as my thought process got. Well, JJ loved the idea. He took it to Vince. Vince liked, and I'm literally repeating the words that JJ said. Vince liked the idea and thought it had potential. But again, timing is everything. And this was around the time when the steroid trials had just completed with the government going against Vince, and he had spent millions and millions of dollars to try to make sure he didn't wind up in jail. That there was so there were several things that were happening that were against my favor. Number one, there was a hiring freeze, so I wasn't going to get hired regardless. Number two, they were letting people go. And number three, those that stayed, the wrestlers received a pay cut, and those that were in the administration received a huge cut. What I'm going to say next is in JJ's book, so I'm not revealing anything secret, but those in administration, JJ took a 60% pay cut.
Oof.
He wound up losing his house. He had to declare bankruptcy, which is why he wound up leaving the WWF and going to WCW. And Gerald Briscoe, who's another dear friend, he verified that story as well. But anyway, so once JJ left, I felt at that point he was my only contact with the WWF. So I kind of took it. I had two little girls at home, and I just kind of took it as a sign from God. No, George, this is not the path I have for you. But don't worry, I'm still going to keep you involved in wrestling. And here we are all these years later with some incredible memories and blessings. Did you guys see the little video post I made today on Facebook about being on TBS Superstation and Gordon Soley mentioned me by name?
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. Although we did see you making pancakes with what the hell were you doing with Billy Corgan and,
And David Crockett.
David
Yeah.
Crockett? I didn't know what was going on.
Yes. That was
I saw that video. I thought maybe I was on drugs for a minute. I was confused.
that was a beautiful meeting. That was at the gym. That was at the Crockett Cup that the NWA started doing. Billy started doing, reviving it, and so that's a beautiful story in itself as to how all that happened. When I saw on the news on the feeds or whatever that they were bringing back the Crockett Cup, my immediate thought was, well, how can you have a Crockett Cup and not have a David Crockett present the cup? And so I reached out to David. I said, hey, this and this is happening. Billy Corgan is doing the Crockett Cup. Would you be interested in presenting it if they say yes? He says, sure, George. Now, mind you, at this point, I did not have any contacts in the NWA. This is 2 years ago. Billy Corgan's NWA. But that has never stopped me. And so I found out, I called, who did I call? I called Conrad Thompson and see if Conrad had any contact. Conrad is a very dear friend. And Conrad gave me their talent relations person who, in the wrestling world from ECW as Simon Diamond. His real name is Pat Kenny. And so when I found out he was doing talent, I reached out to Tommy Dreamer, who's a very dear friend. And I'm like, Tommy, what do you think of Pat? Oh, he's a great guy. Reach out to him. I reached out to Pat. And Pat is a huge Jim Crockett Promotions fan. And he was like, oh, my God. He was drooling almost. Are you kidding me, George? You can get David Crockett to present the cup? Yes, yes, yes. We'll make it happen somehow. And so that kind of showed, Billy Corgan that I could deliver. And it was at that breakfast meeting that Billy had asked for us to come together so we can kind of plan different thoughts and go over different. What can David offer? What can I offer? And I just came out and said, I know a lot of the legends. Are you interested in having other legends be special guests at your show? And he's like, of course I am. And so that opened the door, and very blessed, at various different pay-per-views for Billy Corgan's NWA. I brought in J.J. Dillon. I brought in Barry Windham, Ricky Steamboat, Baby Doll, and so just and there's some other surprises around the corner as well. But it all happened because I wanted to I wanted to preserve the history of our Jim Crockett promotion. And since that's what Billy Corgan was doing, I wanted to make sure that that history was still continued, if you will. And because of that, and which is what caused my selling my footage to the WWE, was because I wanted fans to see that incredible footage of those young Ric Flairs and Steamboats and Blackjack Mulligans and the grandfather of Bray Wyatt and everything else. So when you do good things, and if there's any message I want to leave anyone listening, is that when you do good things come back to you. And I've been very blessed with that, and I believe that with all my heart.
You've put a lot of good out there into the world and into the wrestling universe in particular. And as an educator, I believe that educators are some of the best folks that we have. So you've done your share for humanity. I wanted to ask you real quickly about that footage, and I know that we've talked a little bit before about some of that ended up on, I know, the Magnum TA, Dark Side of the Ring. I know there was some footage on there. Are there shows? Are there places where folks can see that footage? Like, are they on
Most definitely.
the streaming?
So basically, I sold about 6 hours worth of what would be considered in the business B-roll footage. Okay. When I was filming it back then, it was not only was it very expensive to purchase, it was very expensive to develop. And again, we were poor. And so, and you could only buy little reels that lasted about 3.5 minutes. And so I quickly figured out how to shoot a match. And back then, when they put you in a headlock, they kept you there for 5 minutes. It's not like now with a constant movement. And so, honestly, when you look at my footage, it looks like I have 2 and 3 cameras, and that's because I knew, okay, it's Johnny Weaver versus Johnny Valentine, and he just put him in a headlock. He's going to keep him there for 5 minutes. I would get up from the ring apron, run up a couple steps, get a quick shot of the headlock from that angle, maybe go around to the side, get another shot from there. So when you played the film, it looked like there were different cameras that were being used. Either that or do the cutaway, where if there was a famous photographer like a Bill Apter at ringside, I'd get a quick shot of him and then go back to the ring. It would be something else happening in the ring, but it gave that flow and transition. And so I knew I had good stuff. And so with that footage, what I had was, I knew, was the carrot, okay, and the carrot that would grab the attention of the WWE, and that is, we talked about Ric Flair. He goes by the Nature Boy, but he was not the original Nature Boy. Now, since Tim, you're up from up north there, who was the original Nature Boy?
On Buddy Rogers, of course, right?
Right? Okay. So Buddy Rogers did the favors. This was late 70s. The booker was a guy by the name of George Scott, which David referenced in your interview. And he was the one and he and Buddy Rogers were very dear friends. So Buddy came down here and had 3 matches with Ric Flair. One in Greensboro, one in Richmond, and one at the Norfolk Scope. I had, because I sold it, but I filmed the only known arena footage of the Battle of the Nature Boys. Ric Flair versus Buddy Rogers. And yes, it can be seen forever. It can be seen on the network. It's still there, by the way, for those people that have the network. There's that footage is on there. They put, as we know, Hunter is a huge Ric Flair fan, So he's got Valentine versus Flair, Valentine versus Flair versus Steamboat, Harley Race, uh, and so, but because they're people that look at the footage, just they were able to digitize all of my footage and preserve it. And so my footage can be seen on the 30 for 30 documentary, on the Peacock documentary for Ric Flair. When they did the A&E biographies, my footage is on several of on the Roddy Piper biography. When they did the Most Wanted Treasures, my footage is on the Valentine and Brutus Beefcake one. It's on the Ric Flair one. So it's definitely out there. And also another dark side of the ring would be the Abdullah the Butcher. Some of my footage there of Abdullah wrestling Wahoo McDaniel is on
Hmm.
there. So I'm very happy that fans. It's only snippets, but at least it's it's there for people to see. And I have more footage that I have not released. So stay tuned.
How much do you estimate that you would still have in the can from back then?
Many many hours actually, because I graduated from the Super 8 to little the little mini cam VH8, I think it was called. And so with those you can film like 2 hours. So I would film extended versions of the matches. So and I have many, many, many hours of those.
That's awesome.
Yes.
I hope that they're able to see the light of day eventually for fans and historians, especially. I mean, Rich and I, as being librarians, I think we released a little short preview episode just a week or so ago that we're going to change the name of this podcast from All the WrestleManias to the Wrestling Archives. And part of the reason for that is, well, one, we've kind of outgrown just the WrestleManias
Yes.
focus, and we obviously we talk now to folks with long history in the business, and we've talked to lots of indie wrestlers, and we talk about things that are not WrestleManias, but also are as librarians and people who are very interested in sort of the preservation of the art form. We thought that the archives kind of captured a little bit better sort of our project here, so we were kind of excited to do that. And so,
Well, and that actually ties us back in because I have a great WrestleMania story. And
I know you went to which one was it? 30?
30, The Undertaker losing the streak.
Yeah, that's I read your article about it, but I'd love to hear a little bit more
Yes.
about that.
Because to me the best part is how I got there, and it ties into the footage. And so once Hunter found out that I had that the Holy Grail of Rick versus Buddy Rogers for the Battle of the Name, he told Ben Brown, the archivist, make this deal happen. And so we went back and forth, of course. And what I wanted, was not what they were going to offer, but we came to a very nice understanding. And then I decided that I wanted a little bit more because they had talked me down on the price. I wanted a little bit more, so I kind of dropped the hint. Ben, I've never been to. This is before I said yes to the final sale. Ben, I've never been to a WrestleMania. So he picked up on the hint. So, George, are you saying if I throw in some WrestleMania tickets, you can you'll say yes? I said, well, we're getting there. We're getting there. So, long story short, they gave me free wrestling tickets. They flew me first class, and part of my worry was when I turned over the footage, I did not want to mail it because God forbid something happens in the mail, then it's lost forever. I said, if you want it, you're gonna have to fly me up to Connecticut. And let's be honest, I had an ulterior motive because I also said once he agreed to that, I said, well, then I gotta have a tour uh, of the office. If there's anybody around, whether it's Hunter or Vince or Stephanie and anybody from the family, I definitely want to meet them. And he said, yes, George, we'll make that happen as well. So again, not only did they fly me first class up there, the chauffeur that picked me up from Kennedy, very nice young man, told me that, now of course he could be lying, but I don't believe so. told me that he was Vince's personal driver, that he had picked up Hulk Hogan and John Cena and all these huge names. And I'm sitting there going, "Oh my God, this is like too incredible to be true." They put me up in a nice hotel. We went over to the office. I turned over the footage, and then Ben says, "George, I know I promised you I would give you a tour, and I will, but there's nobody here, and so I can't introduce you to anybody." And he saw that I was disappointed, and he goes, "But I have a surprise for you." So okay, that's fine. So we walked around the offices there a little bit. Then he puts me in a car, and he driving, and where are we going? Don't worry, you'll see. Eventually, we wound up to the WWE warehouse. I had a
Mm,
personal tour, and if you guys have never seen like a nice tour, if you will. There's several, they did a couple behind the scenes. So on YouTube, there's definitely 10, 12, 14 minutes of official footage of the warehouse. But I got a personal Ben Brown tour of the warehouse, and just what I would see was just incredible. There was a WWE ring there. I got in the ring. I ran the ropes in a WWE ring. Uh,
nice.
I saw ECW signs. I saw Shawn Michaels robes. I saw Ric Flair robe. I mean, it was just, I was Willy Wonka. No, that was Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory, and I was Charlie Bucket. It was, it was just incredible. He more than made up for not being able to meet any of the McMahon family. And then when WrestleMania 30 happened, they flew me there, gave me great seats, and I happened to be one of those fans that saw Brock Lesnar defeat The Undertaker, and it really was that moment of silence that everybody was looking.
Yeah.
Did we just witness what we think we witnessed? It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible.
Well, as a promoter and somebody who's been on the other side, was that the right call? Was that the place for him to break the streak? Should it have happened earlier or later than that,
I,
or to a different opponent? What do you think?
I think if it had to happen to anybody, Brock was the one. I I would have kept it going a little bit more as a promoter, but to milk it if nothing else. But at the at, and who Vince was ready to do it, and I think that's at the end of the day, that's the boss, and he's the one that calls the shots. And but I would have kept, to answer your question, I would have kept it going a little bit more, a couple more years. That's my feeling. What about you guys?
I don't know. Rich is the Undertaker
I mean,
supermark.
you're so at that point, Undertaker is not looking his best. He's aging like everybody
Yes,
does.
yes,
He's just about to the point to where he's only showing up to fight at WrestleMania at that point. So you have to somehow break it. And while they argued that like Brock Lesnar didn't need the push that he would get from breaking it, it also continues the gimmick that Brock Lesnar had of being the next big thing
that's right.
and being just a, a monster of a human being just tearing through opponents. And so I can't think of anyone else that it would make sense to have ever stopped the streak. And so if it wasn't going to be Brock Lesnar, then the Undertaker has to retire with the streak.
And I would never have done that. I would have eventually had him lose. You gotta do the job right. But and also don't forget that Brock and Mark were very dear friends.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we didn't finish the story, and I guess I know we're running over time here, so we
Oh,
can end
whatever.
here. We can end with a happy ending of the Undertaker's story that I was saying earlier, the Paul Bearer story. And so now, um, fast forward to Ric Flair's last match, and they used my footage there. I forgot to list that one when they were telling the story of the mini documentaries that they did to lead up to Ric Flair's last match. On several, they did three, four. They did four, and on all four of them, they used some of my footage. And one of my favorite ones is when Ric Flair is training with Jay Lethal, the the director Scott was able to take my footage of Ric Flair wrestling Wahoo McDaniel and blend it in almost what Rick and Jay were doing in the ring. It's just poetry in motion from a director's perspective, and of course the guys in the ring. So they used it there, and the coolest part for me was, guys. So the mini, part one is over, part two is over, part three is over, and at the end, each one it says, especially like the number two is when I really popped big time. It says, and we would like to thank WWE for the footage and George Pantas. Oh my God!
Oh, wow.
WWE and George Pantas in the same sentence. Uh, so so it's now Sunday night. Rick is over there wrestling. I needed to go to the gorilla position to take care of something. I went over there, took care of it. Of course, in my formal suit and tie, proper credentials around my neck. I turned to leave and I bump into Mark, the Undertaker. Now I'm not a cursing person, but inside of me, I'm like, holy shit, Mark is here, Undertaker's here.
Yeah.
There is no blanking way I'm going to walk away from here without telling him my story. And I knew if there was ever a chance for him to believe it, this was the one and only time, because again of where I was and what I was wearing. It wasn't like I stopped him at the mall wearing a dirty T-shirt and torn jeans. And what I knew was going for me was he just became a Christian a couple of years ago. His wife is brought him back to the faith. And so I opened my sentence with, "Hi, Mark, George Pantas. I just need 2 minutes of your time, and I just want to say something to you real quick. That if there was a Bible here, I would put my hand on it so you know what I'm going to say is the truth." Well, that grabbed his attention. Uh, okay, and then I told him what I told you guys, and I showed him a picture. I have a picture of me and actually the Iron Sheik. And it's in the back of the TBS studio, that other story that we'll have to tell another time. And so black hair, the mustache. As soon as he saw the picture, like, oh my God, yeah, I see you do favor him. And so I finished telling the story. I said, Mark, do you mind? Can we get a picture together? And he says, are you kidding? And with a big smile on his face, are you kidding? I want to take a picture with you. So he grabs my phone and sticks it with those big arms out there. And I'm like in shock. When you see the picture, you've seen it on Facebook probably. I'm like, I can't believe what's happening right over here. And that picture is a selfie that Mark Calloway, the Undertaker, took of he and I because he wanted to take that picture. And that's the happy ending to the story.
That's awesome.
I have to tell you my pallbearer story real quick.
Please.
All right. So when I was younger and not able to grow facial hair the way I do now, I resembled Paul Bearer, especially as a teenager. And so the WWF Heart Attack Tour came to Baltimore, and so that was featuring Undertaker versus Yokozuna and Brett versus Owen. It's a heck of a house show tour. And one of the things they did in Baltimore was a Paul Bearer lookalike contest at intermission. And my dad went with me, and I dressed in a black suit, and I rubbed baby powder into my face and stuff like that to get me looking really pale. It kind of got messed up because I got licked by a bushwhacker that night.
What a story.
My dad pushed me up through the crowd while they were trying to find people to be in the lookalike contest. And one of the producers...
How old were you then? How old were you then?
12, 13 maybe.
Okay.
And my dad pushed me up through the crowd, and one of the producers spotted me that I was dressed as Paul Bearer, and I had like the foam souvenir urn and stuff like that. And so they got me up into the ring with a couple other people, and I got to do a Paul Bearer impersonation, and it was I'm a kid, whatever. And then this other guy next to me does this killer impersonation, and everybody cheers for him to win, And it wasn't until maybe about a year ago, and I've been reflecting back on this moment and stuff like that, and seeing pictures of Paul Bearer before he was Paul Bearer and being Percy Pringle and just William Moody, and that the guy that won the contest was Paul Bearer out of
No,
costume.
are you
Yeah,
for real? What
absolutely.
a
So
great
Paul,
story!
the dude is just standing right next to me in the ring, and I just
Wow. Did your father
and
take a
so
picture of you in the ring?
no, of course not. And like it
Uh,
was also like this was before like digital cameras
of
and stuff like
course, of
that,
course,
and
of course.
we didn't. There's very few photos of my childhood in general, just because we didn't have cameras and we didn't.
Right.
So, yeah,
What a
that was
great story.
mind blowing to me. But I didn't get to actually possibly become the real Paul Bearer like you. So
There is a great picture of him in
there
his
is.
getup. He
Yes,
could send it to
please.
you if
Yes,
you're nice to
please.
him. So well, we've kept you on here a real long time, and there's lots and lots of other stories. We could have you back. We could talk a little bit about South Atlantic wrestling. We talk about sort of your original foray with VCW. But I thought I would just kind of wrap up with two things real quickly. One is to bring it back to VCW and the Tidings of Destruction show. Of course, I'm just kind of curious about the promotion has really been having a banner year. The ticket sales have been great. The shows in Norfolk, here and across the water in Hampton, and now up in Alexandria. So how are you feeling about, as you're stepping back a little bit from the commissioner role? How are you feeling about, the VCW progress, and where does it go from here?
Very, very, very proud. And it's a lot of hard work by a lot of people behind the scenes, and of course the wrestlers in the ring itself. But we're so blessed to be a cohesive unit, uh, and uh, and I see the sky's the limit. Really, this has been a long project of wanting to go up north. This was definitely not a last minute decision, and we wanted the timing to be right. We wanted the story behind the reason for being up there to be right, and you guys were there legitimately, right? Over 500 people there, standing with
Yeah.
Yeah, 500 and
you
some.
guys were there. I was not able to go because I had a previous commitment with the family, but you guys talked for a second about the atmosphere of that show.
They were standing in the aisles. They ran out of seats. They were going to the back to find more chairs, and then they eventually ran out of chairs, and people were just standing around. The crowd for Logan's last match in Northern Virginia. I know he's not done just yet, but he was from up that way, and so he had lots of friends and family in the audience. They were so proud and so loud and boisterous.
Dirty
Um,
Money
it
too.
was
Dirty Money had
yeah.
tons of
Oh my
fan there,
God, Dirty
man.
Money.
Oof.
I was in the concession stand line behind this girl. We were talking just a little bit, and she said, "Oh, I go to this gym, and one of our trainers, one of our personal trainers, is one of the wrestlers." I'm like, "Oh, that's cool. Who is it?" And she's like, "Oh, it's Dirty Money." She's like, "We didn't had any idea that he did this." I'm like, "Look at that dude. I don't know how he walks around
That's
and you
right.
don't realize that he's a wrestler, but maybe he cleans up real nice. I don't know, but yeah, he apparently brought like the whole fam for that show. So yeah, it was a good time. Jackie and I made a weekend out of it. We went up and spent about 4 days in Maryland, DC. Saw lots of
Beautiful.
friends and
Very
family,
smart.
not family, but
Yes.
friends. I don't know, Rich, did you have other
I
thoughts
mean,
about
it
the
was a
show?
party atmosphere, and that crowd was the most worked up crowd I had seen at a wrestling show in a very long time, to where none of the bad guys were even able to talk. They just got booed out of the ring and drowned out by a very raucous, very excited crowd. And that really added to it. Like you can't get better entertainment for your buck, folks. Like just go and leave your troubles at the door. Forget about rent. Forget about your work, and just watch people fight and enjoy it and tell a story. It's so good. It's so great. I'm obsessed with VCW, and I hope there's more shows in the Northern Virginia area.
Oh,
So
I can definitely tell you, they are going back, And what about the surprise of Sanjay Dutt? And that's the other nice thing that you know,
Yeah.
with independent wrestling, you can kind of do those things as well. And we were very proud that we were able to keep it a secret, like the CM Punk, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We talked to both Logan and who else did we talk to who said they had worked with? Oh, it
Johnny,
was
yeah.
Johnny Elliott. He had both of those guys had said that they had worked with Sanjay Dutt and had a lot of respect for him. So Rich and I were both kind of thinking, oh, I wonder if he's going to show up. And then there he was, and so that was cool, and the crowd was super hyped. They were into it. All right, so last quick fire questions here. We gotta let you go to bed. We don't keep you up all night on the horn here. But so this is probably our last interview under the All the WrestleManias banner, and we have a couple of standard All the WrestleManias questions that we like to ask our friends and guests. I think we probably know the answer to this, but do you have a favorite wrestler or performer of all time?
Yeah, well, obviously.
Obviously. You talked about, obviously, you're going to WrestleMania 30. Would you say that's your favorite one because of your personal story, or do you have another WrestleMania or even a Starcade that you consider to be
Well,
a favorite?
Starcade '83. Of course, I saw it on the closed circuit TV back then, and so that was very, very special. And so that one, and then also, okay, I know we're jumping, but because we're under the last time of this banner in WrestleMania, when I was at the warehouse, I forgot to tell you guys this, and I'll send you the picture. I think I have it on Facebook also. I got to touch the very first WrestleMania ring. They had it all, you know, bundled up, for lack of a better word. But I touched the ropes, I touched the apron. It was, oh my God, to touch that kind of history was just absolutely incredible. But yes, 30 because I was there. I enjoy all WrestleManias. As we said earlier, I'm a wrestling fan, and it'll be hard for me to pick one or the other. Of course, my favorite. Well, you know what? Well, go ahead. Ask your other questions. I do want to somewhere before we end answer what my favorite wrestling match of all time was.
All right, yeah, let's do that one. That's
Okay.
a good one.
Well, I used to say my favorite match was Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat when they wrestled an hour at the Norfolk Scope. It was poetry in motion, as I've said before. But they came back 2 weeks later and they did 90 minutes. 90 minutes. So that one to this day is my favorite match of all time.
Those two were absolute artists together. We watched all three of their matches, with the Nashville one and the Chicago and
the Clash of the Champions one. I can't remember where it was at, but
yeah,
yes,
and
both will tell you. You guys, everybody thinks those matches were great, and they were. But the ones we did in the arenas, and especially in the '70s, were even better. And that's the ones I saw. And I have some of that footage. Well, again, I sold that to WWE, but they have that footage. So, yes,
amazing.
Okay, you said you have a couple of other questions, I think.
Oh, one more. My last one was so you've met and you've seen so many, really of the top stars. Is there someone that you never got the chance to see live or never got the chance to meet that you really would have liked to?
What a great question. Yes, Gorgeous George, because I'm George. And really, to me, he was the original. Before there was a Buddy Rogers, before there was a Ric Flair, they didn't call him the Nature Boy, but he was the one with the robes, with the theatrics and everything else. And by all accounts, in reading about him, he wasn't that great of a wrestler, but he was an entertainer. And so, for many reasons, Gorgeous George would be the one. I would have loved to have seen him in action.
Yeah, many folks credit him as like the concept of the gimmick and the total different character than their real persona and stuff like that. He's a fascinating person to read about.
And he made a couple of movies too, by the way. Alias the Champ is one that comes to mind. So he did a couple of movies as well.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Muhammad Ali sort of famously credited Gorgeous George as kind of the
He
source of
did.
his whole
Yes,
persona. The smack talk and the motor
that's a
mouth
very
and that
true
kind of
story.
thing. So
When I come back next time, remind me to tell you my Muhammad Ali story.
okay,
We'll
I'll
tease
put it
the
on the
audience
notes.
there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still like trying to piece together your whole story of how like you go from a fan ringside filming to like just, oh yeah, I was at that party at the Marriott with Ric Flair. And like how does that happen? And I know we're at an hour and 45 minutes, so we'll save that for the next time you come on.
Yes,
Uh, but yeah,
because that one is a great story as well. How we got to that part. Yes, we would not be a wrestling podcast if we didn't pull a dusty finish, and of course, and so that's why we're teasing the fans here listening of stay tuned, right?
That's right. It'll never
Yep.
be over. It'll never
we're
be
stripping
over.
Tim of the title.
Yeah.
He didn't really win it.
God damn it. Well, we want to put one more plug in for Tidings of Destruction, Saturday, December 2nd, Norfolk Masonic Temple, VCWProWrestling.com tickets and information. Doors at 6:30, first bell at 7:30. Of course, you come say so long, farewell, congratulations to George on his retirement, and come meet David Crockett. Tell him how much you loved him on our show. It's obviously the most important thing he's ever done in his little career is to be on here. Front rows sold out, but there's ringside seats available. General admission still available. Good bargain, good time. You'll have a fantastic time. So, George, we want to thank you again for taking the time, for sharing your story with us. We really appreciate all that you've done and all that you're willing to talk
My
about
pleasure.
today.
Thank you both. This really has been an honor, and I look forward to coming back again, and we'll continue our wrestling love affair. I, and fans,
Yeah.
remember, VCWProWrestling.com. This Saturday, come see amazing action, see me cry, and and let's take that final picture together.
And let's hope you make Jerry cry too.
Oh, I'm gonna
Yeah.
do my darnest.
And so just a reminder, you can find us for a little while yet at allthewrestlemanias.com. After that, we're going to be at the Wrestling Archives, wrestlingarchives.com, not the wrestlingarchives.com. We've swapped over our Twitter to Wrestle Archives at Twitter, ko-fi.com/wrestlingarchives if you'd like to support the show. I believe our new email address is wrestlingarchivespodcast@gmail.com. We're going to have to get used to saying all this new stuff.
Our Insta's changed over as well.
Yeah, we've got new business cards on order. It's a whole rebranding effort. I'm gonna have to get my tattoos erased and redone. Rich is gonna have to have the old logo that he burned into his lawn removed. He's gonna have to rename his child. It's a whole thing.
I gotta sell my car because I painted it with the big logo on it on the hood and stuff. It's real embarrassing.
Anyway, but again, thanks very much for listening, and for signing off, I'm your co-host Tim.
And I'm Rich. Thank you, George. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
I'll see you next time.